Hey guys, we're looking at DPS and the best lance combos, so it's time to do some maths. Or rather, I've done some maths for you. The lance's motion values have been significantly shaken up in Sunbreak, so it's worth revisiting DPS combos and seeing what's been changed. Firstly, we'll look at the bread and butter combos, what you do, or rather what you want to do when you can't do anything fancy. And then we'll look at the sandwich filling, or the stuff that you can't spam constantly, like cross slash, spiral thrust, skyward strike. The stuff that you can't do all the time, but is also higher damage than the bread and butter stuff. I'll show off a few tables and a couple of numbers, but I'll spare you most of the maths. We'll start with raw builds, as most of the lance damage comes from raw, and then we'll have a look at how element changes things up afterwards. The lance's moves have all been buffed, largely on the raw side of things, and with just a sprinkling of elemental modifier increases. So it's probably not a surprise that charged wide sweep, also known as lance slap, is still the best DPS option you'll get out of the bread and butter options. But maybe it's better to say that the charge wide sweep is more like butter with no bread, because the lance slap doesn't combo into itself, and that makes the optimal combos all about getting from one slap to another while keeping the DPS as high as possible in between the slaps. This is where the first big bit of shaking up has appeared. The forward-thinking among you might be wondering all about the new moves that Lance has been given in Sunbreak, like shield tackle, and unfortunately you're wrong. Shield tackle does not seem to be the optimal way to be playing Lance at the moment, unfortunately, but more on that later. The real answer is Leaping Thrust. Leaping Thrust got a very significant buff, and the damage that Leaping Thrust does now makes Guard Dash really difficult to pass up, because it's required to link Leaping Thrust and charged wide sweep into a combo. I'll put a chart up on screen now that'll show the difference in DPS. You don't have to worry about the damage or the DPS value itself, as those will change when you're using a different lance, different armor set. What's important is the percentage difference between the DPSs, as that will stay consistent when you swap lances around, at least until you start factoring element damage in. So looking at the chart, you can see how strong the Leaping Thrust slap combo is. The other combos are between 4 to 9% worse. However, the charged wide sweep is a little bit more complicated as a combo, because you have to charge the slap, and timing it is very important when keeping the damage and the DPS high. But if you are confident using charged wide sweep, then it's absolutely worth using, because it's significantly better than the other combos to start with, and it will scale better when you factor in element. So we've just covered the best DPS combo. Why isn't the video over? Well, the easy answer is that you can't realistically pull off the slap combo constantly throughout the hunt. The time it takes to charge up the slap is a big enough commitment that you'll be unable to adjust your actions against what the monster is doing. Firstly, it'll lead you to getting hit, but more importantly, you won't be able to capitalize on cross-slash. So let's talk about the combos that require less commitment. The triple poke and leaping thrust are both worse options than slap. Compared to the best slap combo, they are 6 and 8% worse. But what they lack in DPS, they make up for in other ways. Firstly, the triple poke wants to use shield tackle. And while I've already told you that it's the air quotes wrong option, Shield Tackle is a legitimately useful move. Being able to reset your triple poke while also dealing KO damage is very useful and helps increase the stun between your shield charges. That means faster KOs, and if you're against monsters that are susceptible, you might squeeze an extra KO out as well. If you go down this road, you'll lose access to Leaping Thrust, and that changes your best DPS combo into Slap Poke Slap, and then Shield Tackle to reset. It'll scale worse with Element, and does do less damage overall, but you have the utility of Shield Tackle. On the other hand, Leaping Thrust is really efficient. It scales well with Element, and half of the time that you're doing the leaping combo, you're in a guard position, so you're really safe. And to top it off, the damage comes in a very small burst, so you can stab a monster's head, guard dash backwards while the monster wiggles around like trying to attack you or whatever, and then you can leap towards the weak point in its new position without losing DPS. And this makes Leaping Thrust probably the best DPS combo in terms of consistency because of how manageable the DPS uptime of this combo is. So I've mentioned Element in passing here and there throughout the video. If we move on to looking at a weapon with higher elemental values, you'll find that the value of Leaping Thrust rises greatly. Slap Leaping Thrust as a combo is still the best combo, and it's the one that you want to do when you have the time to do it. And compared to combos that involve Shield Tackle, the distance between the Shield Tackle and the Leaping Thrust tackles has widened, largely because Shield Tackle doesn't deal element damage. But looking just at Leaping Thrust spam, we'll find that the damage between the Leaping Thrust slap combo and just Leaping Thrust over and over again has decreased into being only a 3% damage loss, which means you're less reliant on the charged wide sweep. So element tangent over, let's talk about the moves that you can't just spam at length. We're talking about Cross Slash, Spiral Thrust, and Skyward Thrust. Starting with the weakest of the three, that's right, Spiral Thrust. Spiral Thrust feels somewhat left behind in the transition from Rise to Sunbreak, because unlike the rest of Lance's moveset, it didn't get buffed. And that's probably for the best, considering how much stronger Spiral Thrust was compared to every other bit of the Lance's moveset in the base game. But regardless, Spiral Thrust is still good, and if you can use it to its full potential, then you absolutely want to, and it's better than doing any bread and butter combo. However, as it stands, unless you can hit all 3 hits of the attack on the monster's weak point, then it's not worth using. So if a hit goes on any other body part, or fails to land, then Spiral Thrust just isn't worth using. And that makes it not particularly useful for when the monster's running around, throwing attacks at you, launching fireballs and the like. But when the monster is already on the ground, it's still really strong. And so having it in the back as a pocket Spiral Thrust that you can use during knockdowns is still a pretty good option. Moving on to the biggest winner of the transition from Rise to Sunbreak, Cross Slash has gone from a move that I would not recommend you using to being arguably the single best attack Lance has access to. There is only one move that has a higher DPS, and we'll come on to that in a second. But unlike that move, Cross Slash doesn't consume a wire bug, which is crazy good. The only flaw is that it's also unspammable, as you have to insta-block something to use it. It's the last nail in Spiral Thrust's coffin, because even if you are able to get all 3 hits of Spiral Thrust on the weak spot, if the monster is still able to attack during this time, it's better to do a regular combo and then insta-block that attack with cross slash. So Spiral Thrust has already been dethroned. What could possibly be stronger than the new king cross slash? Well, technically, it's Skyward Thrust. Skyward Thrust is very situational. It has a motion value of 30 as you go up, 3 hits of 80 as you descend, and then 40 as you land. That's a total motion value of 310, which is absolutely crazy. But the caveat to this is that you need the monster to be tall enough for all 3 of those descending hits to be triggered to make the move truly shine. If we think of examples, Ibushi and Nawa are absolute no-brainers. Skyward Thrust decimates them because of how tall they are. Other unconventional options are things like Shogun Senator. His head is strangely high, so Skyward Thrust is surprisingly effective against him. Then you've got monsters where it's not great all the time, but in certain situations it's been very valuable, like Rathian or Rathalos when they're in the air, or Raknikadaki when she's got abdomen silked up. Oh, and Chameleos. I've got a long list of videos I'd like to make, and an in-depth guide of Skyward Thrust is definitely one of them. So I'll make, or at least I'll try to make, a more definitive list of the entire roster, and whether or not it's worth using Skyward Thrust against them. But if we go back to the DPS of the move, the simple rule is if you can get 2 hits at the top of the jump, so 2 of the descending hits, then it's better than Spiral Thrust. But if you can only get 1 hit, then it's not worth using and bring Spiral Thrust instead. Right, now we have the job of summing up all of that into some bite-sized rules for us to follow. So, firstly, use as many cross slashes and charged wide sweeps as you can. Secondly, fill the rest of your time up with leaping thrusts, but don't get overcommittal and reduce your ability to insta-block and then cross-slash. Thirdly, think about the situational stuff. Anchor Rage is probably going to be your primary Wirebug skill in most cases, but knowing when to switch to your Pocket Skyward Thrust or Spiral Thrust and maximizing your use of both scrolls will really take you to the next level. And that's it. That's the video. As always, comments are appreciated. Tips are always useful. And the same with questions. Your question might answer someone else's question, so if you've got one, don't be afraid to ask. It's going to be helpful for everyone. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. Peace out.